Good morning. Good morning. We're continuing our series on Portraits of the Past. Last week in our video called One Big Happy Family, we talked about Jacob's two wives, Leah and Rachel, and how they competed with each other to see who would have more children with Jacob. And in this segment of the saga, we are going to see how God plunders a cheater. That's the name of this message. How God plunders a cheater. Now, Jacob is in the employ of his father-in-law, Laban, and he has just worked 7 years for his first wife, and then he worked 7 years for his second wife. So he's married to both sisters, Leah and Rachel, working for their dad. So he is a shepherd, and he is taking care of all of Laban's flocks, all of his sheep and his goats and his other animals. And so we see in this part of the narrative that Jacob is being cheated time and time again out of wages, and he receives a sign from God through a dream in how to acquire a flock from his father-in-law, because he needs to leave the father-in-law's home and go back to his home in Canaan. So we see here in Genesis 30 and 31, that's where I'm going to read out of. This is how Jacob acquires a flock so he can leave Laban's household with his wives and children. And we are starting in Genesis 30, verse 25. I'm going to start reading right there. After Rachel gave birth to Joseph, so we see that Rachel has one child with Jacob, just Joseph. Leah has been having child after child after child. And this is the one child that Jacob actually has with Rachel. So after Rachel gave birth to Joseph, now that is going to be the coat of many colors Joseph that you're going to want to hang in here and hear about his story after we get through what happens with Jacob. You're going to want to hang in and just hang in there until we get to this segment of stories. But after Rachel gives birth to Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, "Send me on my way so I can go back to my own homeland. Give me my wives and children for whom I have served you." So we see that Jacob, he doesn't even feel as if his wives and his children are his. One big difference that I want to show you here is when Abraham wanted a wife for Isaac, he sent his servant to this country, to this area, to find Rebecca and bring Rebecca back. A couple of differences there is the servant came bearing gifts. His camels were loaded down with all kinds of gifts for the family. Jacob comes empty-handed. We see that the servant who is coming for Isaac, he is coming with camels loaded down, but he also waits and prays at the well for the right woman. Jacob, he also comes to the well and he sees Rachel and she's very attractive and he falls in love with her, but he doesn't pray at all about whether or not this is the woman for him. He just dives right in and starts watering her sheep. Now the difference is Rebecca watered the camels, but Jacob is now watering the sheep. So that says a lot about Rachel, okay? So also, he has nothing to give the father-in-law, Jacob. He has nothing to give the father-in-law but his service. But the servant has tons of gifts to give to the family. And another difference, the fourth and final difference, is that the servant of Abraham brings Rebecca back to the homeland for her to live with Isaac in the homeland. And here is Jacob living with the father-in-law, with the two daughters, his wives, and the children. He has no household of his own. So this is what he wants. He wants his own household. God tells him in a dream when it is time to go back to the homeland. So he says, "Give me my wives and children for whom I have served you. He's not a householder like Isaac with his flocks and servant. He's a servant in the household of his father-in-law. He has nothing because he worked only for his wives. Now he wants to acquire something so that he can go back to his homeland. He says, you know how much work I have done for you. The words that you're going to hear in this passage are work, serve, wages, hire. It's all about an economic relationship with Jacob and his father-in-law. So this work was done for Laban. The investment of these years of his life did not benefit Jacob nearly as much as they benefit Laban. So his wives and children were still in the household of Laban, his father-in-law. Verse 27, Laban says to him, if I have found favor in your eyes, he says 3 things. Please stay. Why would Laban want Jacob to go? Laban had benefited in every way having Jacob in his household. His daughters have a husband, his daughters have his grandchildren, and he has a great worker. Laban says, number 2, I have learned by divination. Now, this is an occult practice. This is not condoned by the Bible. This is not condoned by God. Occult practices would be, trying to find your fortune in tea leaves, tarot cards, crystal balls, astrology, things like that. Not condoned by the Bible. So Laban says, I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you. Number 3, Laban says, name your wages and I will pay them. Now he has tricked Jacob over and over again. And he's still trying to connive Jacob into staying for a pittance to work for him. Jacob said to him, you know I have worked for you and how your livestock had fared under my care. There are no gifts given to Jacob this whole time. He worked for Leah, he worked for Rachel, he worked for his room and board. The little you had before I came has increased greatly, Jacob says, and the Lord has blessed you wherever I have been. And Jacob explains to Laban that he has been blessed because of Jacob's presence in his household. Jacob is the one carrying the blessing at this point, and Laban, in his greed, is using Jacob every chance he gets. So, but now he says, when may I do something for my own household? But Laban is desperate to keep him there longer. So Laban asks, what shall I give you? And Jacob says, don't give me anything, but if you will do this one thing for me, I will go on tending your flocks and watching over them. So Laban is desperate to keep him there. He agrees to whatever Jacob wants. Now we're not told this until verse 31:10. But in breeding season, Jacob had a dream, and in the dream, Jacob looked up and saw that the male goats mating with the flock were streaked, speckled, and spotted. And the angel said to him in the dream, look up and see that all the male goats mating with the flock were streaked, speckled, or spotted. For I have seen all that Laban has been doing to you. So this is where Jacob gets the idea to propose something to Laban. And this is the agreement. He says in verse 32, let me go through all of your flocks today and remove from them every speckled and spotted sheep and every dark colored lamb and every speckled and spotted goat, and they will be my wages. Now, sheep are usually white and goats are usually black. And so these have some kind of, rare thing going on with them, that they are speckled or spotted or dark colored lambs. So these are rare things. So Laban is going to think he's going to get a very small wage by taking these streaked and spotted and speckled and dark colored lambs. So Jacob doesn't want money. He wants his own flock. So in verse 33, it says, and my honesty will testify for me in the future whenever you check on the wages you have paid me. How? Because any goat in my possession that is not speckled or spotted, or any lamb that is not dark colored will be considered stolen. So this is the agreement that he makes with Laban. And Laban agrees. Let it be as you have said. Now, Laban is still lying and conniving and cheating Jacob. And this is what he does. He goes through his flock and he takes out all those speckled and spotted and streaked sheep and all of our goats and all those dark colored lambs. And he takes them and he gives them to his sons to take care of. And then what he does, he puts a 3 days journey between them, between Jacob and Laban. So he is separating himself from Jacob. He is showing his disapproval of what is going on. So Laban has no intention of giving Jacob a starter flock. So Jacob has to start from scratch and make a flock for himself. In verse 35, it says, that same day Laban removed all of the male goats that were streaked, spotted, and all the female goats that were speckled or spotted, and all of the dark colored lambs. So no starter flock for Jacob. Laban is not about to give him anything. Laban is so greedy, he won't even give his own daughters an inheritance. So verse 36, he puts that 3-day journey between them. So in addition to the weak animals went to Laban, and the strong ones ended up going to Jacob because he did some selective breeding. And over the course of the next several verses, Jacob does some things that he believes will cause the flocks to bear young that are streaked, speckled, or spotted. Now, I have no idea what genetics he was employing here, but whatever he did, whatever action he did, God was behind it, and God's grace gave him the flock that he received. So, and in this way, Jacob grew exceedingly prosperous and came to own large flocks and female and male servants and camels and donkeys. So right before Laban's eyes, with no starter flock at all, Jacob prospers because God is with him. So it was not the methods he used, but God wanted to plunder Laban for being a cheater, and Jacob was going to be the beneficiary of that plundering. So God saw everything that was going on, and he decided to bless Jacob by plundering Laban. The cheater. So God showed him in the dream, of course, like I said before. And so Jacob has this incredible flock now. And he goes out and he meets his wives in the field, and he talks to his wives, and he says, I have acquired this flock. You know that I have worked for your father with all my strength, yet your father has cheated my wages 10 times. And however, God has not allowed him to harm me. So God has taken away your father's livestock and has given it to me. Okay, and that is how God avenged the cruelty and abuse afflicted on Jacob by Laban. God sees all things, and God says, vengeance is mine. Jacob patiently waited for God to show him what to do to rise above his circumstances. And by obeying God, he triumphed over his adversary, Laban. And I want you to stick around and wait for the next video. In 2 weeks, we're going to have a video of the continuation of this story. I just love diving into this scripture and seeing all of the things that God does in the lives of the patriarchs. So I want you to continue watching the Portraits of the Past, and I want you to have a wonderful, wonderful day and a wonderful weekend.